All right, I'd like to call to order our Louisiana Wildlife and Fishery Commission meeting. It's 9:30 right now, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Joe, you want to lead us in that, please? To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next, we need an adoption for the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Susan. Roll call next.
Andrew Blanchard,
Here.
Brandon DeQueer, Andy Brister, Joe McPherson, Gene Reynolds, Kevin Segura, Allison Sari is absent. Mr. Chairman, there are 6 commissioners in attendance, and we have a quorum. Secretary Montese is also present.
Right. Now we'll go ahead and ask for a motion to adopt the commission meeting minutes of January 5th. Got a motion by Brandon, second by Joe. All in favor, state aye. All right. No opposition, motion passes. Next, we need a motion to approval of the February 2nd, 2023 agenda. Got a motion by Joe, second by Brandon. All in favor? State aye. No opposition, the motion passes. Next, we have our commission and special announcements, personal privileges. I'd like to welcome everyone today to our meeting. And if anyone wants to speak, we have cards in the back that need to be filled out and brought forward. Other than that, Colt, you got it?
Yes, sir. I was going to give you a brief update on the legislative oversight committee that occurred yesterday. There was a joint meeting to exercise oversight over the speckled trout regulations that this commission had passed. Recall that the proposed rule was a 13.5-inch minimum length limit for speckled trout and a 15 fish bag limit. Jointly and unanimously, the committees voted to find that unacceptable. We did not get any formal direction as to what they would find acceptable, but now the ball is back in this commission's court. So I would expect that our fisheries group is going to be bringing some proposals to you probably as early as next meeting, and we can explore alternative management options for speckled trout.
All right. As far as my stake on it, we did go ahead with the NOI at the previous 13.5, with 15 limit, I think that's what it is. And we had several different options on the table from our science that was brought to us. And I don't know, some of the after we had adopted the NOI, some of the charter people had contacted me, and they told me we should have went with 9 and 12. So I'm not sure exactly what is reasonable and what's not, but I guess we can go ahead and hear what they have to say in the next couple of months as we go forward, with this. But we need to lean on the science and the biology in order to bring this thing back, to where it is. And our department, I think they're doing the best they can, right there. And if somebody else has the science, they can beat ours. They just need to bring it forward to this commission.
Yes, sir. Recall that the 20% reduction in female harvest was the target, and that was going to result in about a 5-year recovery to get us to our target. So the management options that were provided to you were based on that. Certainly we'll regroup on it and bring some proposals to you shortly. There's a couple of ways just procedurally that it can work, either through the potpourri process, which is basically an amendment to an APA rule. So that's probably a 2 to 3 month period, or we can do a whole nother NOI process, which will take about 120 days. So those are kind of the procedural options in front of us.
All right. Do we have any other questions from the board, Mr. Joe?
Cole, if we don't take any, if the commission doesn't take any action, then the rule is just dead.
That's correct. The current regulations would remain, which is of course 12-inch and 25 back limit.
Any other questions from?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I have a moment, just real quick? I'll be
Go ahead,
brief.
Randy.
I just want to quickly mention that our department will be hosting the annual meeting of the Southeast Deer Study Group on February 26th to 28th at the Crown Plaza here in Baton Rouge. I'm proud of the work and efforts that our staff have gone through to put this on I think there's 17 member states, and it rotates through. Each state is responsible for putting it on, and usually occurs, in February. So we have 17 member states. We currently have 316 folks registered. We're anticipating over 350 total. That's a very large group that we're expecting. We've also have 8 other states and 1 Canadian province that's outside of the Southeast Study Group that are coming down. In addition to that, we have over 37 sponsors and contributors to this that I would like to thank at this time. In addition, next month, I will be coming to the commission to give a presentation. Our deer program received from the National Deer Association, the outstanding program for the work that they did with CWD. So we were recognized nationally for that. I know our staff has undergone a lot of effort and tremendous work across the state, working with CWD, and they were recognized for that as well. Another one more thing is that we were also hosting, we're very busy this month. We're hosting the Mississippi Flyway Council Technical Section meeting. So all the representatives from Mississippi Flyway and some from the Canadian province will be down as well in Lafayette at the end of February as well. So just want to make that mention.
Good. Well, congratulations on the effort on the CWD and on the other projects, right there. Anybody's got any other questions before we move on? With no other questions, we will move on to enforcement report. Major Skinner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. For the month of January, we had 2 boating incidents, no injuries and 1 fatality, 927 written citations, 407 written warnings, and 21 public assists. And as usual, I have a couple of cases that we'd like to make mention that were made over the last month. Enforcement agents cited a Pierre Park man in Assumption Parish for hunting wild quadrupeds during illegal hours, taking an alligator during a closed season, hunting deer without deer license or deer tags, failing to validate a deer harvest, possession of marijuana, criminal trespassing, and possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number. Agents were conducting surveillance around 2:30 a.m. near the subject's residence and observed him shining a light while carrying a rifle. The subject was found to be hunting illegally and in possession of marijuana. Further investigation revealed the subject was in possession of a live infant alligator and a recently harvested deer carcass. Subject faces civil restitution for the illegally taken deer totaling $1,624. 10 subjects were cited in East Carroll Parish for illegally bow hunting with arrow pods. Agents were on patrol along the Mississippi River when they initiated compliance checks on hunters south of Lake Providence. All of the subjects were in possession of pods while bow hunting. One of the subjects killed an antlerless deer with the use of an arrow fitted with a pod. Agents seized all of the pods and the antlerless deer in association with this case, and the subject that used the pod to harvest that deer faces civil restitution totaling $1,624 for the replacement value of that illegal deer. Enforcement agents cited 3 subjects in Orleans Parish for hunting from a moving vehicle. Agents received an anonymous tip about people hunting rabbits from all-terrain vehicles in New Orleans East and responded to the complaint. During their surveillance, the agents observed the subject shooting shooting rabbits from the moving ATVs. Agents stopped the hunt and seized 23 rabbits and donated them to a local charity. Those subjects face $729 in civil restitution for those illegally taken rabbits. And if you're interested, Mr. Chairman, I have a brief update on some of the enforcement effort that is happening in the CWD zone around Region 3. It will only take a minute if you'd like
Okay.
to hear it.
Sure.
So our agents have spent numerous hours, and they're doing a really good job of keeping an eye on what's happening in that area. As of yesterday, a total of 28 citations were issued for the baiting ban. 9 of those citations were issued in Madison Parish, with 4 warnings issued there. Franklin, there were 7 citations, and in Tensas, there were 8 citations. And we have issued 5 citations for the exportation of carcasses from the CWD area. This report was prepared by Captain Trey Mason, along with Captain Scott Watson and Major Rick Owens. And those agents up there are doing a pretty good job of keeping an eye on that area and trying to monitor everything that you guys have put in place to stop the spread. And that concludes the report, sir.
All right. Sounds like your agents are busy throughout the whole state right there. And we commend all of them for what they've done in their efforts to control everything that we have. So we thank you. Any other questions, anybody? No, thank
Thank you.
you. All righty. Next on our agenda is to receive and consider a resolution to add property through the free lease to Richard K. Yancey Wildlife Management Area, Alvin Landry, attorney.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Secretary Monisset. Good morning. My name is Alvin Landry. I'm an attorney for the department. Today, I'm offering a proposed resolution to add property to Salvador Wildlife Management Area, which is due south of New Orleans. It's going to be 1,906.2 acres.
Mr. Chairman, this is, I think Mr. Landry is actually doing number 9 right now, which is to receive and consider adding property to Salvador. So I think
Oh,
Okay,
they're flip-flopped on the, okay, let me adjust real
Yeah.
quick.
so if it's all right, we could take it
Yeah.
out of order.
right, yeah,
Okay.
it's, well, let's go back and get back in order right here. So we need the
I can
first
do
one.
Yancey first real quick.
Yeah, let's do Yancey real quick. Okay,
Okay, I'm offering a proposed resolution on this to add property to Rich K. Yancey WMA. This is in central Louisiana. Richard Yancey lies north, a little bit, it's east of Marksville, west of Angola Penitentiary, and a little north, comprises a large area. Well, my thing's not working here. On this one, Concordia Parish School Board free leased their section 16 property to Wildlife Fisheries. It's an in-holding on Yancey, 560 acres. We completely surround it. We have a road going through it. And they finally decided to just go ahead and lease it to us. And they're not charging anything. This 560 acre area, we're gonna get the map, show you exactly where it's at. This is, you can tell what that star is Yancey is in Concordia and Parish and north of Point Capee and northeast of Voiles. This is the in-holding in question. The yellow part right there in the middle of the red part is Yancey and the yellow part is right in there. We're gonna be dedicating it for the protection of wildlife, for conservation and management of excellent habitat it offers, and also public recreation. Once this free lease is added, Richard Yancey will be over 71,000 acres in southern Concordia Parish. I ask that you consider and approve this proposed resolution.
Right. Cole, on here, we need to adopt a motion to accept the resolution.
Yes, sir. This takes affirmative action by the commission to move the resolution.
All righty, and go ahead and ask for a vote.
I have a question. Mr.
Okay, go ahead there, Joe.
Alvin, do we know what Concordia did with this property prior to the free lease? Did they lease it out?
No, sir. I didn't have any evidence that it was leased. We didn't have any issues with them closing out leases with other clubs or anything like that. We certainly didn't. Tommy can answer better.
Yes, sir. Tommy Tooman, Director of Habitat Stewardship and Operations. So when we first they reached out to us because they were having some issues there. It was open, it was public hunting. They did not have a lease on it. But what they saw is there was some damage to their infrastructure. There were people hanging stands and building stands everywhere. They wanted to kind of get that activity under control. So they reached out to us to incorporate it into WMA. That way we could kind of control the access and eliminate the damage to the infrastructure and the timber that people basically just doing whatever they wanted to do, cutting trees, clearing, rutting up the road. So they reached out to us to incorporate into the WMA as that will stop that activity.
So they just left it open to the public. They didn't lease it out like the law requires.
That's correct. They had no lease, so it was just people, I don't guess they were allowed the activity. It was just going on. So they realized they needed to curtail that activity, so they reached out to us to lease it.
Thank you.
Any other question? With that being said, I need a motion to adopt the resolution on the Yancey WMA 560 acre. Who said? Brandon, was first, second by. You second by Gene. All in favor of the resolution, state and I. Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, motion passes. So we'll go on to the next one.
Thank you, sir. The next one is going to be the proposed resolution to add property to Salvador Wildlife Management Area. And then this management area is due south of New Orleans, going to be 1,906.2 acres, as I noted earlier. It was donated in this past November by Chevron USA Incorporated. It's comprised of marshlands and wetlands. And it's an in-holding in, you see where Salvador is south of Orleans Parish, where the WMA is going to be added to. And this is the red area. It's a complete in-holding. We surround it on all sides. And there's a water area on the eastern side of it, this border. It's excellent habitat. It's going to be dedicated for the protection of the wildlife, conservation and management of all the wetland habitats that it supports, and also for public recreation. And we ask that you consider and approve this proposed resolution.
All right. Any questions on the resolution or Salvador WME? Okay. So I will ask for a motion for the resolution. Kevin first, second, Gene. All in favor, state and I. Everybody had done passed, no motion passes with full support. So we thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
All right.
members of the commission.
Okay, next, we receive a resolution for receive public comments, I guess, on the quadrupeds first, and then we'll do the other one next.
Correct.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr.
Um,
Chair, members of the commission. Again, I'm Tommy Tuma, Director of Habitat Stewardship and Operations. So I'm here today to present summary of public comment for the conditionally approved hunting season notice of intent. I stood before you last month and we proposed our changes to the hunting seasons and hunting season dates for Louisiana. So since that time, we received 40 comments relative to the proposed changes, 39 from emails when I had one phone call, and those comments came from 31 different individuals. It is important to note, I really didn't know where the bow fishing one kind of landed. I guess I should have asked Cole, but we did have a person that you'll see on that email. It's different from the one that Susan provided you yesterday. So there's a comment about a person wanting to restrict bow fishing activities during waterfowl season. I didn't know if that was a fishing regulation or a hunting regulation. So I'm gonna call no joy on that. Anyway, here are a summary of those comments. I guess the most comments we had was on the early till season. And then we did have some questions about Sherburne and WMA deer season. You know, we're talking about a pretty substantial reduction in that season due to the habitat issues and some recruitment issues with that herd. Other than that, it's pretty split and down there. There was quite a bit of conversations I've had with some people about deer hunting for dogs, basically in Northwest Louisiana, where there's some complaints about some dog hunters that had smaller tracks, you know, releasing the dogs on 20-acre tracks, and they obviously are going to get out and sort of trespass issues. So other than that, it's been pretty quiet for the amount of regulation or proposed changes that we had. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions? Joe?
I wanted to publicly make the statement that you are real good about forwarding every comment, every email, every text, whatever it is, in whatever form you get it, even phone calls to the commission, and we see all those, and I think most of us take the time to read them all. So we do have all that input. I think what's important for the public to understand is that the biologists and the people that are involved in formulating these changes see those also and evaluate them and evidently feel comfortable with their decisions or their recommendations for changes to the commission. There was one that I think we got 3 on. That was the deer hunting in the Felicianas, where they feel like there's been a recovery and we still give them a limited number of deer. And then there were several on the teal season. And I just wonder if we could get a comment on those 2 things, why we feel like that we need to stay with basically the same teal season, and why we can't increase that take on the deer in the Feliciana.
Certainly, and I'll pass that off to Jonathan, I guess, and what he's talking about is the area 4 deer season, I think, Jonathan. So just so y'all are aware, but so the public's aware, every email that I get, I forward it to you and I forward it to the appropriate program. So if it's a deer question, I forward it to Jonathan. If it's the WMA, I forward it to Jonathan and the WMA manager and the biologist. So they all formulate a response, and I try to provide those responses to you. That way, you know that we're not just taking comment without any answers. We engage in an active conversation with the public. That way we can kind of, hopefully they better understand where we're coming from, the data we're utilizing to propose those seasons, but also get some input from them because they're our users. I enjoy the interaction of the public comment period and kind of finding out where they're at. So maybe there's something that we haven't thought about from a public use standpoint, but I would turn that over to Jonathan, and I think Jason Olzak is here and he can speak on the early teal season. If he's not, I can probably answer that question. I've already talked to Commissioner Scare about it this morning.
Jonathan Vardlawn, Deer Program Manager, Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries. The question specific to Deer Area 4. Deer Area 4 is one of 2 deer areas where there's a reduced deer limit in our state. And that's been the case since 2017. We had identified concerns in advance of that change that warranted us to consider some type of alternative season, whether it was limited either sex days, or a reduced deer limit. We had a couple of different options at arriving at a way to address some of the concerns we were seeing in the years leading up to the 2016-17 window at which those changes were made. Since that time, we have experienced actually an increase in harvest, which was not anticipated. We didn't anticipate to see an increase in harvest where we decreased a deer limit. But as many of you know, the majority of deer hunters in Louisiana actually do not kill a deer or harvest a deer. And then on top of that, the majority of them, most of them that actually harvest a deer, harvest only one deer. So what we saw during that time was an increase in the number of hunters harvesting one deer. That really doesn't answer the question as to, well, what does that mean today? Well, what we're doing is we're having to look at the same indices that we looked at when we made that decision in 2016-17. And we're evaluating those each and every year, just as we are this year. At the close of season, we're evaluating our physical data from DMAP. We're looking at our browse data, and we're looking at reported harvest. If we see anything in that data that would raise concern, then we certainly would then bring forward an amendment to our current season structure based on those concerns. However, we've kind of just been moving along without seeing much of a shift or change in that physical data, as well as our harvest data has basically been a slight increase, and we've maintained that slight increase through this period of time. So there's, at this point, not a lot that would warrant a change. Typically, when a change is made, it's in response to some concern. Until we identify that concern, we certainly will probably maintain our current season structure. The complexity there is often, it's very difficult to manage deer at the property level with a statewide or a deer area limit, because it doesn't take into account parcel size or the number of hunters per tract. And that's a complexity. So in general, most of the deer, especially in Deer Area 4, are harvested on private lands, in which those private landowners to a degree are going to limit their own harvest within those state limits that are available. What we have not seen, we haven't really identified any concerning trends that would warrant us needing to increase the harvest. What would be some things that would be a catalyst for recommended liberalization of season? Well, declining deer condition, increased herbivory on the habitat, increased crop damage. Those types of things would indicate that there's a need to correct that balance. There's a need to harvest more deer. One of the ways you can do that is you can offer more days, or you can increase a limit. And I think until we really identify that and we're able to show that that's occurring at a trend, there's a trend of that occurring, we'll probably likely stay course simply because the data that we have now, we're just not seeing a real substantial change in any of it. And again, it's at that point, there's certainly individuals who would benefit from an increase in harvest and limit. There are programs out there that afford them that opportunity, such as DMAP, where tags are provided for a property based on that property size. So what they're able to do is they're able to, at that point, potentially exceed a daily or season bag limit based on those program tags that they provide. And we more or less encourage folks to take advantage of that option because they appear to be more of the exception than the norm. So anytime you have someone that falls into the exception and you have a program that can accommodate them, we try to steer them that direction for that very reason, rather than making a broad change across multiple parishes based on the needs of what could be a circumstance on a specific property. So hopefully that provided some insight into why we're continuing on with our current strategy and harvest, not harvest recommendation, but limits.
And I guess possibly one of the things that you mentioned, them enrolling in DMAP, even if they have smaller acreage, they could form a cooperative and meet the DMAP requirements, couldn't they?
Certainly. Cooperatives are actually encouraged. That allows folks with common interests to maximize their plan and put it in effect over a larger area.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think Jason Olsack, our waterfowl program manager, is here, and he can kind of speak to why we are choosing to propose the the early teal season dates later in the framework than earlier in September. So I'll ask him to come up.
Thanks for having me, Jason Olzak, Waterfowl Program Manager. The teal season, the Fish and Wildlife Service framework, the allowable dates for teal season are just in September. Historically, the major pulse of teal migration has been late September. Actually, it's late last half of September, early October. So in order to set the season during that migration push through Louisiana, we make an attempt to set that teal season as late into September as possible. So this year, being that the 30th of September falls on a Saturday, that kind of shifts that 16-day window where we can open and close. Typically, we'll open on a Saturday, close on a Sunday. But with that closing day necessarily being a Saturday, the last day of September, that kind of shifts the opening day to a Friday, which is a bit more acceptable than any other day of the work week. Alternatively, I guess if we do have the option of making that full 16-day season that encompasses 3 full weekends, starting on a Saturday, ending on a Sunday. That would have put us at September 9th this year, which would have been the earliest opening day for teal season that we've ever had. And I can entertain any other questions or further.
Go ahead, Kevin.
And that, that 9th day is just, it's the migration's not really in full force if you open it on a 9th, opening it that early. And then what causes the teal to migrate? Is it moon phases? Is it sun? Is it for the length of the day and all of that?
For the most part, photo period
Okay.
and weather in the breeding grounds. So, an early cold front up north could easily result in an early teal migration. However, there's always a question of, are we starting the teal season too early? Are they here yet? Well, we know that, we do the survey, the aerial survey on the coast the week before teal season opens, and we always count birds there. But the major pulse or the numbers are coming through later in September. And so it's always been an attempt to make that as late into September as possible. We cannot have the season on October 1st. It's just not in the framework.
Okay, thanks for that information.
All right.
Sorry. Well, I'll just add to there probably within the last 7 years. I don't remember the exact date or the exact year, but we have started this on a Friday in the past.
All right. So the season would start on September 19th, September the 9th. It is, no,
That would be an alternative. That's not what we proposed.
that's not what you
Yeah.
propose. Okay. All right. I thought I understood that. So, any other questions on the teal season? What-
The proposal is for the last 15 or the last 16 days of September, open teal season. So open Friday, September 15th to Saturday, September 30th. Yes.
Understood. With no further questions, Tommy, you can continue.
Okay, just let everyone know, in the past, we used to have public meetings and we'd go around the state and we would still consider that if that was requested. But we plan to host a Zoom public comment meeting. So I will give a presentation basically that was similar to the one that I proposed to y'all, except the actual season dates will be in that presentation where it was generic language to you all. Users that want to attend can register at the meeting link. That will be in a press release shortly after this. the advantage of the Zoom meeting is, once the Zoom meeting is held, we do have panelists, which would be myself and all the other Office of Wildlife program managers. If somebody wants to ask a question at that meeting, we will be there to answer those questions. And then once that meeting is over with, we post it on our website. So persons who did not or were not able to attend, they can see that presentation. And if they have any follow-up questions, they can email me at that email that's here. And you will also be receiving public comment at the Wildlife and Fisheries Commission meetings now through March. And then you can also send me public comment through regular mail, email, phone call, however you want to get in touch. You can come visit me in person. I'd be happy to talk to you. And we'll do that until 4 p.m. that Thursday, March the 2nd.
Right. That's great.
Mr.
Don't have
Chairman.
Any other questions? Go ahead,
I have one
Kevin.
more question. I've got several calls in our area. And the way the framework's falling is, and it was more so worse this year, is that we had a closed season whenever kids were in their Christmas break and weren't able to get out and hunt. And it's just, I think that there'll probably be more comments coming in on that, but I think it's important that we look at it too, because they're the future of keeping hunting, you know, of hunters. And if we have where they're off and they can hunt, we want to try to give them every opportunity to be able to get out in the field and hunt.
Right. And so I'm going to speak for Jason, but our philosophy there is we try to maximize the number of weekends. We try to make sure that we're open Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. New Year's this year was on the Saturday a Sunday or a Monday. I can't remember, but I know it was kind of an issue. And then we also try to provide early season hunting for those who want early season and late season hunting for what. And then we just back in the dates from there. And the way the calendar works out with 7 days in a week and 60-day season, sometimes you can't massage those dates the way that you're requesting. This year was kind of strange because I know my kids didn't go back to school until Thursday, which was January the 4th. That would have, to keep the season open through a Thursday, that would have kind of made our weekend openings kind of odd. So we certainly look at that every year. It just kind of, unfortunately, the calendar fell this year to where, we probably went through New Year's, but then those kids were off for another 3 days, and we certainly understand where you're coming from. But we would have had to, it would have messed up an open. We try to maximize the number of weekend openings. That would have messed up a weekend opening had we run through that Thursday. And then all school systems are different, and it's very hard to predict that. But thank you for your comment. We certainly will make sure we look at that in the future.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No. Okay, no other question. We'll go on to the public comment section of the wild bird rules and regulations on the WMAs in the general. Who you have?
I'm trying to get Joel up here. The computer is locked up, it seems like.
Oh,
Okay, so I'm here today to present or ask you to consider an amendment to the hunting season notice of intent. And in short, I'll follow it. We've had some issues and we've had some reports of folks utilizing turkey and deer tags other than tags issued to themselves. In other words, my wife does not hunt. They would go harvest an animal, utilize their wife's tag, and kill 12 deer instead of the 6 that are issued to you. It's kind of confusing that anybody would interpret the rule since the tags are issued to yourselves, but we're taking this step to kind of strengthen the language that's in our rule. And that language would be for the deer hunting regulations, deer tags may only be used by the hunter to whom the tag was issued. Hunters who allow the deer tags to be used by another person or used. So it would make it a violation to use someone else's tags. And then if you allowed somebody to use your tags, they would be subject to fines and other administrative, including but not limited to automatic forfeiture of any remaining deer tags for the seasons where they're issued. So it's kind of surprising that we're having to deal with this and I'm bringing this to you, but that's kind of where we're at. And the second part of this amendment would be for the turkey hunting regulations, and that language mirrors the same as the deer. It's like you would not be able to utilize any turkey tags other than the ones issued to yourself with the same penalties, the forfeiture of your tags if you allowed somebody to utilize your tags. And with that, I will entertain any questions on the amendments that are proposed.
All right, any questions?
Tommy, I mean, this has been going on forever, where you use your kid's tag, to tag your deer and outlaws will be outlaws. Could the penalty be that you lose your hunting privileges for some period of time? I mean, just taking away the remainder of their tag, they've killed 10, you're not gonna let them kill the other 2.
I believe that's a cold question, sir.
So both of these violations would be class 2 violations. It doesn't come with a forfeiture of your hunting privileges immediately. However, if you fail to pay civil restitution or the civil fines, the result of that is loss of your license. The thing we're trying to address here is not so much the person who's utilizing the tags that aren't issued to them. We already have an ability. That's already a class 2 violation. It's the person who's allowing the use of it. Previously, the only way we could get them was through proof of conspiracy to commit a crime. And of course, that's under Title 14. That would go through the DAs. The actual violations here go through our ALJ process. And so we were separating the crime from the conspiracy, and they weren't really getting prosecuted. So that's the attempt here. But no, sir, there's not a way other than failure to pay the violations that we would
See if you use Tommy's example about the wife that doesn't hunt, but the outlaw gets tagged in her name and uses those every opportunity to be able to harvest 12 deer instead of 6 deer. Well, you're gonna, if I understood you correctly, you're gonna take away the remainder of the tags from that person that never hunted in the first place.
correct. And she'd also be given a class 2 violation subject to civil fines as well that come along with it.
But your response is that under that classification of fine, there's no stiffer penalty we can give them.
My understanding, and the colonel can correct me if I'm wrong, for a first offense, for a class 2, we do not suspend or revoke licenses. For a second offense, we will. So if this is habitual.
That's in law.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When we come up against these things, maybe we ought to look at that and see if that's something we talked about before. Half these people were on the commission is whether or not our restitution is kept up, and we've never done anything with that in 5 years. Revamping that, if you kill the deer on the left, it's one price, but if you kill the deer on the right, and I don't know what happened to the deer in the middle.
Still flying airplanes at the airport, I believe.
Yeah. So, but if we could look at that, and I would like to revisit the restitution at some point, but if we would look at, are our penalties accomplishing what we want them to, or are they severe enough? In this case, I would suggest that telling somebody that wasn't hunting in the first place that you can't use the remainder of your tags, nor can your outlaw husband use them anymore. He knew that in the first place.
That's correct. And again, this is an attempt to get to the person who is allowing the use that we didn't really have a tool before.
You couldn't have even fined them, you're saying before.
That's right. We had to file conspiracy charges under Title 14, which is a tough thing to do. And it was getting to the DAs when the crime itself was being handled through the ALJ process. It was just not a real clean way to do it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, any other questions?
If there are no other questions, I would ask for your favorable vote to include the amendments into the conditionally approved notice of intent.
I have a comment, not a question. Is this appropriate?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
I'm learning, okay? I will say thank you for doing this. It's a real problem. And I've been prosecuting for a long time, and it's a real problem what's going on. I'm not going to tell stories about how it happens because I don't want to train people how to do it. But it is a real problem, and I like the idea of keeping it in-house and not getting out into into the DA's offices, even though I'm in one of those offices. That's a good idea. And I agree with Joe. If we can stiffen that a little bit more and keep it in-house, that's even a better idea. Because it is a real problem. Whenever somebody says, well, they can only kill 6, I start laughing, you know.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you. And certainly this is a joint effort between, I know our legal and enforcement's been involved with communications every step of the way. So with that, now I ask for your favorable vote, please.
One more question. Joe. Go ahead.
I'll direct this to Cole. I was expecting to see an amendment on the mud boats. That doesn't go in this, huh? The mufflers.
So my understanding was that we handled the WMA muffler restrictions when it came up last meeting, and that got made part of the
We went, we
of the
adopted it
of the
last
original
month.
NOI.
Okay.
To expand it to
That answers
other state waters would be an additional
Thank you.
separate NOI.
That is correct. Ms. Susan and I made those changes that afternoon and it was published in the January edition of the Register.
So right now, all we need is a motion to adopt the amendment. Okay, I ask for a motion to adopt the amendment on the new hunting season NOI. All in favor, state aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Joe made the motion, second by Brandon.
Mr. Chairman, you please ask for public comment before you take action on the motion.
Okay, public comment from anyone on the action before we take a vote? Seeing no public action, we'll go ahead and get the vote. All in favor, state aye. Any opposition? No opposition, the amendment passes.
All right, and so just to follow up, since it is now part of the notice intent, we will also collect public comment on these amendments as you have voted them in at the Zoom meeting. We will also, you'll be able to make the public comment. There will also be an administrative public hearing in April, and I'll have that date next month. It'll probably be the 20th or the 21st, as it's got to be within 30 days of the publish. So it will be published in the Register as a potpourri next month. And so we'll have an administrative hearing for those who wanted to come meet and state their support or opposition to these amendments. So thank you for your time today.
All right, thank you, Tommy. Next, we'll hear an update on the feral hog control in Louisiana. Dr. Jim LaCour.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having me today. We're going to talk to you about hogs on this presentation and then deer on the next. So if we just combine those, I guess we talk about sausage. So anyway, any of you who go outdoors in most of Louisiana know that we have a pretty significant feral hog problem. So wild pigs, feral hogs, piney woods, rooters, whatever you call them locally, they are a non-native invasive species. They're not native to North America. They were brought in early in history in the 1500s. We've had them in this state in small populations for hundreds of years. They became popular for hunting in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in particular, and are today for some. But they were spread throughout the state in small numbers, which due to their high fecundity and population efforts, their population grew exponentially throughout the state. So this is a very destructive animal. Once again, very fecund. They can have 2 litters of piglets a year. They average 6 piglets per litter, and of those 6, 8 of them survive. So there's that. They use their snout to root up the land. They cause erosion. They pull up pine or conifer and hardwood seedlings. They compete with wildlife for mast and cause bunches of damage. And this is just a little overview for folks that are not real familiar with them. But we have them in all 64 parishes. We still estimate the population between 900,000 and 1.2 million animals. Our regulations are very, very lenient as far as the harvest of pigs. They can be on private property. They can be harvested year round, 365 days a year. during daylight hours and at night as well. The nighttime hunting requires that the hunter call the parish sheriff within 24 hours before going out or immediately upon shooting at a hog. So it's pretty easy to hunt them. People have basically carte blanche to kill them. You have to hunt pigs or trap them in a cage type or corral type trap. You have to have a basic hunting license. They may be snared if you have a trapping license. Wildlife management area hunting and most federal land hunting is typically concurrent with other seasons with the gear appropriate for that season. So for instance, if during squirrel season, you can shoot pigs on wildlife management areas with a rimfire rifle or a shotgun with shot sizes appropriate for squirrels. During open firearm season for deer, you can use a center fire rifle or handgun or a shotgun with buckshot or slugs. And so functionally, the WMAs are open, 6 and sometimes 8 months a year for hunting feral hogs due to other open seasons, including turkey season, nutria season, et cetera, et cetera. Due to their rooting behavior, they go down farm rows when farmers plant crops. They pick out seeds. Farmers have to replant. They also get into mature crops. Most of the crops in Louisiana are impacted by feral hogs. They can chew down stalks of corn to get to the ears, and they eat the ears, sugar cane, soybeans. Basically, any crop is affected in one means or another. Back in 2015, Dr. Sean Tanger at the LSU Ag Center sent out a survey to row crop farmers for agricultural damage. So this survey does not include damage to forested property. It does not include damage to golf courses, landscaping, any of that stuff. And at that time, the estimate of damage was about $75 million annually in Louisiana, once again, for row crop agriculture. So that's a very significant impact for our farmers. This is just a little picture of some damage for those who are not familiar. The picture on the right is some deep rooting. The hogs use their nose and root in usually soft soils, but sometime in limestone roads and asphalt driveways to get to earthworms and grubs and other invertebrates or roots and tubers under the ground. The picture on the left is actually an airstrip with rooting in it. And I don't know about y'all, I don't think I'd want to try to land my plane on that airstrip. This is a graph of the wild pig harvest or feral hog harvest, if you prefer. You can see that we have become better at hunting hogs, and there are more of them to kill. So we have, if you notice in the 2020, 2021 hunting season, we had a large spike in the number of hogs harvested annually. Now, this is a mail out survey and internet survey as well, but it has gone out for a long time. And this is the same one we get our deer information, our squirrel information, everything else off of. But the replies from the hunters indicated in 2020, 2021, they killed about 625,400 hogs. That's a lot of hogs. So something that changed, a couple things changed right there at that interface that probably resulted in that peak. One of which was COVID-19. People were at home or at the camp and had time to go out and shoot pigs. And the other, that's about the time our regulations changed and the necessity for a night shooting permit were revoked. So once again, they just have to call the sheriff now. There's no permit necessary on private lands. The next year, that number was 499,000 pigs, still quite a lot of pigs. And what we do find is that we have groups of hunters that are gathering up. They've got very good equipment, night shooting equipment, thermal scopes and semi-automatic rifles. And there are a number of these folks out there that are getting permission or working with farmers. And these groups are killing 1,000 pigs each for, during the year. So they're becoming very efficient at shooting these pigs. Some of them are using drones and other technologies to find the pigs and make their outings more efficient. This is a comparison of self-clearing permit harvest, which is hunter harvest, and wildlife and fisheries personnel harvest on our WMAs. So our wildlife and fisheries personnel trap the wildlife management areas generally after hunting season. So they don't try not to disturb the areas or certainly don't want any bait out either. So they typically lay off trapping during the hunting season, but in the off season they trap. And you can see that they're both killing a number of hogs on our WMAs. So the wildlife and fisheries folks last fiscal year killed just over 1,000, and the hunters over 2,000 hogs. So in this year, of course, it's early in the fiscal year, and once again, we have not been trapping for most of the hunting season. So that wildlife and fisheries effort, which should increase significantly throughout the remainder of the year. USDA Wildlife Services operates in our state. They help us on some of our wildlife management areas with aerial gunning out of helicopters. They do quite a bit of work around the state too on private properties. People will contract them to work on their private properties. And they have another program that we'll talk about in just a moment. But they are killing a significant number of hogs annually. So they that's the wrong number. That's not 200,000 that they're killing. So they're typically averaging about 13,000 a year. I'm sorry, we just redid these graphs at the last minute and apparently they're not correct. But they're averaging, 13, 15,000 hogs a year that they're killing by their efforts. And this is the other program that they have. In the last farm bill, there was $20 million set aside for a pilot project where the USDA Wildlife Services got $10 million and NRCS got $10 million to work together to put together specific areas for intensive control measures, once again, as a pilot project to see if it is possible to knock back those hog numbers significantly to the point where they can have an effect and affect the landscape for the farmers and other folks. So these are the numbers that they have harvested in these areas. So control area 1 is the one in blue in the center part of the state. That's Red River, Natchitoches, Wynn, Grant, and Rapides Parish. They had started work on that, interestingly, through a state wildlife services led initiative before this pilot project had come in. They went in initially and worked with the soil and water boards, and were the first year they offered to do control, that's aerial gunning, trapping, and shooting for farmers or anybody that wanted it, but it was a lot of farmers and WRP owners. They charged them $1 an acre to do it. The next year, they were able to do it for 50 cents an acre. And then after that, the farm bill money came in, they were doing it for free for them. But they have, you can see the number, they've killed quite a few pigs in that area, over almost 12,000 pigs. We have a list of testimonials from some of those farmers and folks up there. The farmers, some of them were able to plant this year with zero intrusion by hogs. They didn't get into their seeds and have to replant. They did have one of the comments was that, this person killed 100 hogs annually before, and they were only able to shoot 5 this past year. So it's a significant reduction in that southwestern part of the state. That's Calcasieu and Cameron parishes. They went in there and actually were able to reduce alligator nest depredation significantly down there. And in the other control area is Madison, Tensaw, and Concordia parishes. A lot of farmland up there, and they've had a good impact. These guys also, as we spoke of before, they're becoming very efficient at killing pigs. And they have several of the Wildlife Services personnel between trapping and night shooting and day shooting, they're killing over 2,000 pigs apiece individually. So they're really getting after it. And that's per year. So it's a good effort. It shows that if you can throw enough money and personnel at the problem, you can do some good. They're going to try to expand these areas outward and keep the control in the middle. One of the problems that we foresee is if ever the money dries up or when it dries up, if control efforts aren't maintained for, a couple of years, it'll be back probably just like it was before. The hogs will re-infiltrate and breed and repopulate those areas. So maintenance is going to be an issue. So this is probably what everybody wants to hear about is the toxicants. So right now there are 3 potential pig toxicants on the runway, one of which I don't have in this presentation because it's become sort of a moot point, but that was kaput, which is a warfarin bait. If any of you are on Coumadin blood thinner, that's the same exact chemical. It basically would make the hogs hemorrhage to death. It was released in 2016. We had some issues because it had a dedicated feeder. And so we had registration on it pulled in our state because black bears could easily access the feeder. It turned out to be a non-issue because the product wasn't commercially available for quite some time after it hit the market. So it never got used in our state. It's come back around, and the Texas legislature actually wanted for Texas A&M University to test it again. So they did some tests in captivity and on the landscape. There was some tests done over in Georgia on it too. They found it very effective in a pen, and when pigs were in a pen, they would eat it and die readily. But on the landscape, it was not palatable. These are wax cubes. They look just like rat bait blocks. And, they would pre-bait their feeders, with corn, whole corn, and the pigs would be hitting them hard. And when they shifted over to the paraffin blocks of kaput, they wouldn't touch them. They'd go away and go eat acorns or worms or whatever they were eating before. So functionally, unless they reformulate that bait, it's not going to be useful on the landscape. That's where that is. The other hope is, I'll put it that way, and you'll see why in a moment, sodium nitrite. So sodium nitrite is a meat preservative. It breaks the nitric acid cycle. It's been used for many, many years, and it prevents the formulation of botulism toxin in meat. It's toxic to everything, but the toxicity is basically controlled by a enzyme in our body that reduces the effect of the chemical. So when this is consumed by a person or an animal, the nitrite binds to the iron molecule in hemoglobin, makes the hemoglobin unable to carry oxygen throughout the body and supply the tissues. If left untreated, it ends up in death. But there's an enzyme called methemoglobin reductase that kicks this molecule off of the iron in the hemoglobin and prevents it from causing problems. So we happen to have a lot of this enzyme, so we can take quite a bit of this chemical. Pigs have very little of this enzyme. So once it binds to the hemoglobin molecule, they can't kick it off. So they go off in the woods, their blood pressure drops because it also dilates the blood vessels. They can't carry oxygen, they go to sleep and they die within an hour or two. So pretty good. If any of you had bacon or any processed meat this morning, you ate this chemical, it was in there. So we know it's pretty safe for human consumption. They've done plenty of testing on this. If a pig takes a lethal dose of it, goes off and dies, as soon as he dies, if you cut out the ham, cook that real fast and eat it, you'll be fine because the amount of sodium nitrite in that muscle is lower than the amount that's in bacon that you buy at the store. Also, they looked at secondary effects on scavengers. They fed pigs this sodium nitrite. As soon as they died, they took the stomach out, took the contents out. fed that to coyotes and vultures, and neither one died. The stomach acid converts this nitrite to nitrate, which is less toxic. And so it's safe for scavengers as well. The downside of it is hygroscopic. It draws water. It's very bitter and salty. And once it draws that water in, it reduces itself to sodium nitrate, which is less toxic once again. So that issue has become overcome. Well, that was redundant, has been overcome by using an alkaline base, and it keeps it in the nitrite form. So that was some good science there. Let's see, I think we already talked about that. So one of the sodium nitrite baits that's being worked on is the product that's Hog Gone 2. It's a product of USDA Wildlife Services and an Australian company. They've been working on it now for at least 10 years. And it's very promising. They have done some field trials. Their first iteration of it looked like a racquetball can about that size with the toxin in the middle and some bait on the outside so that mice and rats and things wouldn't get to the toxin, but the pigs didn't really like those too much. So the current formula is in a peanut butter base, and the pigs come in and they gobble it up and they go off and die. So it's been very effective. The first real field test they did with it, they had a placebo bait, peanut butter bait with no toxicant in it. The pigs were eating that every night, and then they switched and gobbling up, cleaning the plate. They switched formulations and used the toxic bait. The pigs found it salty and bitter, and they spilled a lot of crumbles on the ground. Well, the next morning, a bunch of birds came in, and it's very, very toxic to birds, so they died. So they had to go back. They lowered the amount of sodium nitrite in the formulation, more palatable to pigs, and they did very well with that. They also put a little wavy man deal. This is the feeder. That's the peanut butter. That's pigs eating at the feeder. Feeder has a 30-pound magnet on it to keep raccoons and other things out from opening the door. And that's the little wavy man. They put that on there. That comes on just before daylight to deter any birds. So they put they tested this in Texas and in Alabama. In Texas, they killed 91% of the pigs in the area in one night with their feeders and their toxicant. Alabama, 74% in one night. So, and the wavy men were effective enough at keeping the birds out so that personnel could go there in the morning, sweep up any few crumbs that were there and prevent any bird mortality. So they've kind of got this worked out. They were going to go last year for EPA registration. They, in that process, the EPA, when they were just looking over the documents, they saw that they tested only during one season of the year. And they said, well, if you'll only be able to register it for that season of the year. So they've gone back and redone this test throughout the seasons. They're just finishing up the last of the testing now. They're similar results, very toxic, no mortalities on birds. So they're ready to present it back to EPA. But this past, right around Christmas time, EPA changed some of their regulations. So previously, once this packet reached EPA, this research packet, which paper-wise is about 3 feet of paper research on this project, 3 feet tall. It's a lot of papers to read. But previously, EPA had 24 months to review it. They've just switched that out to 36 months. So now they can take 3 years to review this before they approve or disapprove it. Initially, Wildlife Services or National Wildlife Research Center was saying they would have this product out summer of 2025. And that would be initially for use by federal and state employees. And once they kind of get the feeling for it, it would probably be permitted for use by permitted pesticide applicators. But now they're looking at summer of 2026 because EPA, now if EPA approves quicker, that's fine, but it may be as long as summer of 2026 if EPA approves it all, which they should. The other one we have, once again, sodium nitrite. This is being worked on by the LSU Ag Center on the Bob Jones Idlewild Experiment Station right up here in Clinton. And Dr. Glenn Gentry is working on this. And what you see there is a regular corn feeder in the back, and then there's a galvanized contraption hanging on the side of it. And that galvanized contraption distributes these. These are fish meal and potato dextrose agar balls, basically a little bigger than a golf ball. And they contain enough sodium nitrite to kill a 100-pound pig in each one of those. So his idea was that you can hang his contraption on any feeder. It uses a two-way system similar to a high-tech hog trap, or like the Jaeger Pro trap, where you get a picture of the pigs, you push the button and it drops the gate on a trap. Well, in his situation, you could see the pigs, you could count the pigs. If you got 6 pigs, you drop 6 baits in front of them. Excuse me. And pretty effective, very effective. By dropping it right in front of the pigs, you reduce non-target issues because they'll gobble them up. They really like them. And they're very effective at killing pigs. So we also took some placebos and no sodium nitrite and buried them in the woods. And I was sitting on a deer stand one day looking at some pig rooting, and I said, how many animals walked across this before a pig dug it up to get the worms? So I went and stuck some in the ground just to see what would happen. A few of them the raccoons got, but the pigs dug them up and ate them. So that's a good sign. And we thought about it and said, well, you know, for the farmers that are having their seeds eating, if you are able to bury these things before you plant your crops or when you plant your crops, you could go in and run a subsoiler or what have you and put these around the edge of the field, and the pigs will gobble them up and die before they get to your seed. So that was kind of exciting. That's the sodium nitrite, by the way. That's the amount to kill one pig, 100-pound pig. So they did their testing in a pen. They have a large pen where they just trap the pigs in there and test it. And it's very effective. But once again, you know, when you have things in a pen, they don't have a lot of other things to eat. So that may skew the results a little bit. So the next thing that needs to be done is the bait needs to be tested outside of the pen where pigs can choose what they want to eat, whether it's acorns or earthworms or these baits. So there's some things that have gone awry with this whole program. And once again, EPA. So EPA has requires an experimental use permit to test these products out in the open, basically outside of a pen. So they have an exemption for state agencies that permit pesticides, which would be our Department of Agriculture and Forestry, but they do not consider LSU a state agency. And so they just, once again, the EPA changed some stuff at Christmas time. Before then, they were going to charge $326,000 for that permit. Now it's up to over $500,000 for that permit. And once you put in an application and give them your $500,000, they can take up to 18 months to decide whether to give you a permit or not. So that is not doable with the current finances at the Ag Center. So what we kicked around, and the department has given some money to the Ag Center to do this work. So we're working together on this. What we've come up with is a kind of a plan B, if you will. So Dr. Gentry up there has ordered a bunch of pig brig nets. If you're not familiar with it, that's a heavy net trap for pigs, and it's got an apron that goes to the inside. You put it up high and start baiting, and the pigs go in and out, and then you lower it a little bit so they rub their backs on it when they go in and out. And then when you're ready to catch them, you put it down on the ground, and the apron goes towards the center of the trap, And they're so used to the net, then they just root under it and go into the thing. But when they go to walk out, their feet are standing on that apron and they can't push out. Very simple, but very effective trap. So he's ordered a bunch of these pig brick nets. They're going to string together over a little over 2 acres worth at a time, let the pigs come in and out with bait, get them used to coming in and out. And then the night the toxic bait is put out, they'll actually drop the nets to the ground, they'll root in and they can't get out, which is basically what EPA is worried about, is a toxin getting out of an enclosure and affecting other animals. So this is kind of skirting the line in between, but it was kind of the best we can do with what we've got at this point. And Dr. Gentry is going to be retiring not too far down the road. So, you know, he had hoped to get this project finished before he retires, but if he has to wait 18 months for the EPA to even consider a permit and then 3 years on the backside of the project, he'll be gone before it's ever approved. So that's a quick and easy down and dirty update on hogs and what's going on with them right now. You have any questions for me?
Any questions? Doesn't look like.
Yeah. Dr. LaCour, do you think it would be worth our effort to do a resolution directed to our congressional delegation, asking them to consider intervening on both the cost and the time period?
I think
For testing?
it would be something, yes, sir. And I think that this has been stonewalled for a long time, and the fact that EPA can put off this for so long, and I wonder how many other valuable products for society are being put off just the same as this, just working with this and seeing how they can extend their time frame basically indefinitely. But yeah, 3 years is a long time to wait for approval of something.
Well, when you have this kind of problem and this much loss of,
Yes, sir. It's
from agricultural, and you and I had talked, and I don't know if to what degree Jonathan and his group can pick up on this, but I seem to see we've got so many more hogs than we did have. And I think I'm seeing a drop in weight as a result of it, 10, 20 pound drop in deer weight as a result of the hogs foraging the acorns. That's where that fat comes from, is my understanding in the fall when you're hunting. And when you go out in the woods, I mean, those hogs, they've rooted up everything. They've gotten every acorn out there.
sure, they definitely affect, and we see that, but they definitely affect all the other species in the woods. For deer and other game animals, squirrels and turkeys, they compete directly with them for their winter mast, their acorns. And some of these areas with large numbers of pigs, they scoop up all those acorns, and within weeks of them falling, they're all gone. And so with deer, their reproduction depends on them being in an increasing body condition throughout the winter. So eating acorns, getting fatter, that makes the does, a mature doe should have at least 2 fawns most of the time. Well, instead they'll have 1 fawn or no fawns. Squirrels, turkeys, all the same thing. And forest regeneration, we see it's well documented in the literature, and we've seen it on some of our own properties. Pearl River, after Hurricane Katrina, they remove all of the seed bank from the soil, so for hardwood regeneration. So after Hurricane Katrina and other catastrophes or heavy, clear cutting, you get a tallow thicket grow up. That's the only thing in the soil they don't want to eat. So it affects everything.
Well, if you would be kind enough to draft up something for Mr. Garrett to put into legalese, and maybe we could have that at next month's meeting.
Very good, sir. We can do that. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
We have hogs in every parish in the state of Louisiana?
Yes, sir. We do.
Wow, I didn't
We,
realize that.
And we have hogs in downtown New Orleans. We've had hogs right here on Blue Bonnet, right down the road from this office. Of course, they're higher numbers in some areas than others, but yes, sir, they've been reported in every parish.
Why don't we just put a bounty on them
Well,
like we do Nutra?
well, that's been tried,
No.
actually. So and the thing about nutria, there's no domestic counterpart. For feral hogs, there is domestic pigs. And so Fort Benning, Georgia, a number of years ago, tried a bounty. They were turning in tails of pigs, and they were paying very handsomely for the trappers, for their fuel, for everything. It was $40 a pig bounty on the tail. And so after a year or so, they started noticing that for all the money they had paid out, the damage was going up, the number of pig sightings was going up. So they put the MPs on it, and the people were going to the, slaughterhouse and buying boxes of pigtails and turning those in for the bounty. So yeah, if we get domestic nutria, we're going to have to consider that program.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Leave it to people. Huh?
Yeah, that's it. Well, we, I don't know where the answer is there to get this under control, but it seems like it's a real problem.
It is, yes, sir.
Right there. So, all righty. No further questions. I'm gonna go ahead and move to the next item, which is the CBD chronic waste disease, and you can give us a report on that.
Yes, sir. So just a very brief overview again. Chronic wasting disease is a neurological disease of the deer family caused by a prion, an infectious particle that is very resistant to denaturing. You can't kill a thing that's not alive. It's a protein particle. So we can denature it with fire of 1,500 degrees. We can denature it with some chemicals. But basically, it's in the environment. Once you got it, you got it. It's spread from deer to deer through saliva, urine, and feces. And that's important for some of our regulations to remember that it's spread through saliva, urine, and feces. Once a deer contracts it, it's 100% fatal. There is no cure for it. They all die. It has a very long incubation period from the time they ingest it to the time they start showing signs can be 16 to 24 months, which is a great mechanism for a disease to thrive because they are walking around spreading the prions all over the landscape as they progress in their disease. So it's been found in 30 states and 4 Canadian provinces, and all of our neighboring states have this disease. This is the latest map from USGS, and it's a September 2022 map, but locales have not changed. But if you can look at that and kind of see locally you can see where our cases are on the map in that Tensaw area. There are also some cases just across the river in Mississippi. If you look at that line, there's almost a diagonal line from Mississippi to South Tennessee. And there's a lot of cases in the Tennessee area that you see. That was an area that apparently was just smoldering for quite a long time in Tennessee with chronic wasting disease. And the prevalence in some of those areas is about 70%. So 7 out of 10 deer have the disease. So we don't want to have that. That's our goal, is to prevent that from happening if we can. This is our statewide map of our sampling. To date, we have sampled 2,226 deer for chronic wasting disease. We have 296 of those pending. Some of those are en route to this office in the mail. They've been entered into our data system, but they have not arrived here yet. Some of them are at the diagnostic lab at LSU for testing. This is our CWD control area. We have portions of Madison and Franklin, all of Tensaw Parish in this control area. Those are the numbers of deer we've tested in those areas to date this season. So our guys up there have been really hustling. I'd like to give them a big shout out. They have been working long hours and covering lots of miles to accomplish this. Plus they're looking at Union and Morehouse Parish, which is near a positive deer that was in Arkansas, actually two positive deer now on Felsenthal National Wildlife Refuge in Arkansas, which is 7.5 miles over the border. So they've been hustling up there as well, plus getting their normal parish samples. So kudos to them. Kudos, I guess a kudu is a big animal, isn't it? Kudos to them. Unfortunately, at the beginning of last year, we found CWD positive in Tensaw Parish. And that's one of those northernmost dots that you see there. And this year, we started finding them a little further south on a hunting club. Now we are up to 10 positives in the state of Louisiana. Of those 10, 8 of them have been confirmed by the National Veterinary Services Laboratory in Ames, Iowa. We're still waiting on confirmation for the last 2, which that was this past Sunday and Monday that the diagnostic lab at LSU let us know those were positive. So we should get those confirmations at any time. Just so you know what the process is, the biologists harvest the samples in wherever, Tensaw Parish or anywhere in the state. They send them to us once a week unless there is some critical sample that they think is a positive deer. They'll send that one special to us. But we are, when we get the samples here in Baton Rouge, we go ahead and put a laboratory number on them. We do all the paperwork with them. We bring those samples over to the Louisiana Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab at the LSU Vet School. Those samples are formalin fixed retropharyngeal lymph nodes and brain stems. And so we give them to them, and they've been doing a really good job for us. So last year we had some issues with long sample times. They had some issues. They had someone out on maternity leave. They had COVID come in, shut the lab down for a while. But this year they're doing much better. We have had some, I'll call them gluts of samples, particularly around Christmas time and Thanksgiving, when a lot of people are out hunting. You know, we'll send in 200, 300, 400 samples at a time. So those gluts take a while to get through. But all of these deer from this Tensaw area, we've been having them move those samples up to the front of the line and get them tested as quickly as possible. So the last 2 we got in, the one on Sunday was harvested 12 days before we got results. The one on Monday was harvested 7 days before we got results. So it's hard to beat that anywhere. We have the diagnostic lab over there is a NALM lab. It's a National Animal Health Laboratory Network lab. It is certified and inspected by USDA, which is critical for a laboratory. And that's the only one in the state. And getting that USDA certification is extremely hard. So that's why there aren't more laboratories in the state or the nation testing. And something of interest, when we were looking at our CWD program, we decided to utilize one specific of the 2 possible testing methods. So the 2 USDA approved testing methods are immunohistochemistry, which is tested on formalin fixed tissues. They cut a section of the tissues or multiple sections, stain them, and with a special stain and a special chamber, and the pathologists look at those. It's a little more labor intensive, but it is the gold standard. So the diagnostic lab here at LSU, we bought them a machine. We staffed them last year when they were short. They're doing well with that now this year. But anyway, that's the gold standard. So when it's positive, it's pretty well going to be positive even at the confirmatory lab, unless there was some significant error. The other sampling method, which is more popular in other states, is ELISA, and that they take a sample of the tissues and homogenize them and put them in a chemical test, basically. If it tests positive, it has to be confirmed by IHC because it does have false positives on a regular basis. And either or is fine for testing. It's 2 different methods. The ELISA test works on fresh tissues versus formalin fixed tissues. But the good thing is, and maybe it's blind luck, but we're testing with IHC or immunohistochemistry. The folks they're testing with ELISA are in a bind right now. So there's such a glut of samples across the country coming in that the reagents are not available for the tests. So a lot of states are sitting on a lot of samples that they cannot run. In fact, our neighbor Mississippi is sitting on 1,500 samples right now that they can't get tested because there are no reagents to test it. So we're very fortunate. And once again, I don't take any credit. It's all blind luck that we are testing with a system that we can still get reagents for. So let's see, we are, oh, yes, sir.
Could I ask you to back up one slide?
Sure,
please?
yes, sir. That one?
No, sir, one more.
Okay.
That island that right next to the original thing, that's Mississippi, I assume, huh?
Yes, sir. It's right on the river there. The river runs right there through it. The samples are in the batcher of the levee, so they're on the river side of the levee, and it's right up against the river. The northern points there are right at Yucatan. So
That's Yucatan, that island there
yes, sir.
with the old oxbow.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Do we know, is Mississippi I assume they've got samples from that.
Yes, sir. They're testing thoroughly all through that
Have
side.
they got any positives? I mean, it's such close proximity.
None right there. They're still a little further north. But they're doing a good job of testing. But, and once again, they still have a lot of samples that they don't have results for too. So
They're all
they-
from this year.
what's that?
All of their samples are from this year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I'm jumping the gun here. Go ahead. It contaminates the environment. So, yes, sir. So it is, it's shed once again in saliva, urine, and feces. So. Okay, sure. Good question. So prions are naturally occurring. They're everywhere. We have them normally. They're in plants, they're in other animals. What they do is they're gatekeepers for some of the cells in our body. So especially brain cells, but they're in other parts too. But for the ones that we're interested in are around the brain. So what they do for the brain cells is they act as a gatekeeper. They let water in, they let nutrients in, copper, other micro minerals, and keep out bad stuff. So this is a bad prion, if you think of it like that. It is able to induce changes in the normal prions. So it comes in when they contact this, induces changes. I talk with my hands so much, I'm gonna knock the microphone off. Induces changes in the normal prions. And so they no longer let water in. They no longer keep the bad stuff out. They no longer let the minerals in. And those brain cells end up dying and they shrivel up. And so what happened when you look at a positive deer under the microscope, you see holes in the brain. That's where the brain cells used to be. But because these prions, our normal prions, are now abnormal, the cells are dying. Well, they make the normal cells mutate is what it is. They are able to induce mutation in the normal prions. Yes, sir. It's a scary thought. I mean, we think of things infectious as being viruses or bacteria or fungi. This is a completely different class. And of course, we have our own Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in people, mad cow disease, bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Each species has their own prions, but this is just the one for deer.
All right. Kevin?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
While we're on prions, I have a question.
Sure.
That's been asked to me a couple of times. Can you test the soil to check and see if you have prions on your property if you're a hunter?
Very good question. Currently, no. There is a new test that is being evaluated right now. It's called RT Quick, or real-time quaking induced conversion. Ultimately, it may be an official test or allowed as official test by USDA. It is much, much, much more sensitive than anything we have now. And it basically, you put the tissues and the chemicals or soil or water into this thing, it vibrates, and the vibration makes the things multiply and have chain reactions, chemical reactions, then makes them more easily detectable. So that is on the horizon. We actually have some dirt from some of these areas that we just picked up, and when the technology becomes available, we're going to look at that. There are some of these areas where taxidermist dump sites. So it's possible that's one mechanism where the disease got there, but we're going to look at that as soon as the technology catches up, which will be soon.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. Would you back it up? I think one slide backwards.
That was,
That one, the yellow dots inside the white, what does that represent?
the yellow dots are all our tests from that area. So that's samples. And if you are familiar with that area of the country, which I think you are, there are
bit.
a lot of islands of forested area within agricultural land. So some of those dots are actually really concentrated. If you can just look through that layer, you can kind of see the darker areas, which are the forested lands. But there are some very open areas that are, you know, when they're just pure dirt, they're not really deer habitat. We're not going to get any samples from those areas.
So is that this year? What year time?
Yes,
frame?
sir. That's this year.
Any other questions?
No.
on right now, Andy?
Yeah. Oh, and Jonathan just reminded me to tell you, some of those dots represent multiple tests in that same area. We purposely back out a far ways on these maps so as not to, you know, point to any landowners or anything like that unnecessarily, but there may be multiple sites at each one of those, or multiple tests at each one of those dots.
All right. You want to continue?
Yes, sir. So as with our first case, our first CWD case, we had tested, had the DNA tested on that deer. It took 8 months to get the results, but it was determined that that deer was a deer that was had the same genetics as other deer in the area. So it was a local deer. We're going to do the same with the other 9 or more. If we have more, we're going to hold them until the end of the season, which the normal season is over. We still have a few clubs in Tier 1 DMAP that are hunting till February 15th. So after we collect all our samples, when we finalize our CWD positives, we're going to get some samples submitted. I contacted Mississippi, and they use a consortium of geneticists out of, well, they're primarily housed in Iowa, but that's who they use, and we're looking at working with them. They use a little different test, not the microsatellite test, but what's called a SNP, which is hundreds of thousands of pairs, tens of thousands of pairs of genetic material to compare deer. And once they get a map, basically, once we send them a number of samples from the area, they can go in, map it out, and it's quicker. So we're looking at that right now. We're in talks with them as far as getting those deer tested. So our response, we, of course, when we found our first deer at the end of last season, we instituted or implemented our CWD response plan. We increased hunter harvest sampling. We're not actively out there shooting deer. That's a rumor that is still going around. We did harvest deer in 2018 in response to Mississippi's positive right across the river in Issaquah County. We are not doing that now. We're using strictly hunter harvest samples at this point. We have enrolled some of these clubs in Tier 1 DMAP, which allows them to sample deer for us longer, so they can go all the way into February 15th as a Tier 1 DMAP club. So that gives us some more samples. One of the main tools that we have, and we have very few tools to fight chronic wasting disease now that it's here. We enacted a local feeding and baiting bans in Tensas, Madison, and Franklin parishes. If you remember, initially we said that this disease was spread through saliva, feces, and urine. All of those components are at feeders. So also, I didn't mention it, but when a carcass is on the landscape and melts down, the prions go into the soil there. So that's another mechanism. But as far as the feeding, nose-to-nose contact and feeding in one location, the deer are exposed to concentrated sources of prions at a feeder. And so that's why feeding and baiting have been banned in that area. Carcass movement restrictions, the lymph nodes and the central nervous system are teeming with prions. We want to keep those local in an area that's infected already if we can, and not move them out across the state. If a hunter brings an infected deer from that control area out, to their home in New Orleans or Alexandria or wherever they live, and throw that brain of that deer out on the back 40, other deer can be exposed to the prion there. So we have a carcass movement restriction in place that they can move cut and wrap meat. They can remove deboned meat without the spine or head. They can move antlers with clean skull plates, a cape, which is a skin, or finished taxidermy mounts. But they cannot move a whole head out of that area with the brain intact. They cannot move the whole head out, period. They can't move a whole carcass out. The spine and brain and head basically need to be removed from that animal. And that, once again, is to help stem the spread of the disease outside of that area. I think y'all have seen this before, but we do in that area have coolers put out for hunters to drop off the heads if they wish to have their deer tested. This disease has never been shown to be contagious to humans in any part of the country. It's been around since 1967 in Colorado. No one has ever been documented to be infected with it, but it is worrisome, and the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization recommend people test their deer before they eat them if they hunt in the CWD area, or they also recommend, I should say, not to eat a deer known to have CWD. So we make it simple for people to drop off their deer head in these coolers. You fill out their information, they bag up the head, leave it for us. Our biologists go around, pick them up, include them in their samples that they send to us for testing. And we've had pretty good success with this. We've had to date 214 samples submitted in those coolers in that area. So that program seems to be working very well. And in fact, we picked up one of our positive deer out of a cooler. And it was actually harvested in that same area to the south where the majority of our positive deer were, but the hunter took the deer out, brought it to a cooler, and was sampled there. So that was good that we caught that deer through that cooler location. What we do when we get the results, when I get a result from the laboratory, from the diagnostic lab here at LSU, even before any confirmation, I will look up that information off of that card, whether it's a cooler card or whether it was collected by our biologist. I call the hunter and inform them that the deer is suspect to have CWD and that they should not eat the deer. And so people are getting the word that they should probably hold their deer before they eat them. So they'll either, hang them for a while in the cooler, or they will freeze the meat. And then if it would happen to be positive, they throw it out. So it's been working very well with that. Most folks are kind of shocked when they get the call, but they seem to be very appreciative of the call.
So the coolers that you're dropping the heads in, are those freezers or are those just like refrigerator?
They're refrigerators.
And how long can the head stay in one of those?
Easily a week, but our guys go by there a couple times a week and pick them up. They in some states use freezers, but that actually adds a layer of complexity to collecting the sample for two reasons. One, the head has to be defrosted before the samples can be collected, and two, for our test at the laboratory, the freezing changes the architecture of the brainstem, especially, so that when the ice crystals thaw, it already has a bunch of holes in the brain. So we can test frozen tissues like that, but they prefer fresh tissues or refrigerated tissues. So our guys, as soon as our guys get it, they put it in formaldehyde anyway. So, but freezing makes an artifact in the tissue. But we're trying to spread the word on proper carcass disposal. This is the third time I've had this talk this week, and We'll have a lot more of them, I think, in the future. Preferably burial on site, a lined landfill, or leave it in place. By leaving it in place on the landscape, at least you're not moving it into a new area, and at least it's in an area that already has chronic wasting disease. So we don't recommend putting it in water. There's some magnetic attraction between carcasses and bayous or creeks. They just want to go there. People want to dump them in the water, and that infects the water, and plus the decomposing carcass reduces water quality. Burning, we do incinerate meat and carcasses. It has to get 1,500 degrees, and for conventional fires on the landscape, unless you have a heck of a lot of fuel around that deer, you're not going to get up to 1,500 degrees. And transport to another property is, once again, we spoke of that already, is discouraged because we'll spread the prion across the landscape. So our response, we've got public meetings. Of course, we've been doing a bunch of those, and there are already a number lined up in the next few months. Coolers, website information. We have some videos. I think it's 11 videos that were put together by Mississippi State. They're caricatures, very, very good language and very easy to understand language. It's targeted so anyone that watches these little short 2-minute clips will understand what they're saying. Each of them addresses a different question. What is CWD? How do deer get it? What happens to the deer after they get it? So it's very informative and very easy for everyone to understand. So those are on our website. We have every test we get back from the lab, we post on the website, all the negative tests. We post them on our website, and hunters, when they put their sample in the cooler or give it to a biologist, they get a number on a receipt. Basically, they can look on the website and see what the test results are. And one other thing before we finish up here, we do outreach as well, but there's been a lot of talk on the street, if you will, or in the camps, and we see it on social media that, Wildlife and Fisheries is making money off of this and going to get rich. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. This is 100% money going out, nothing coming in from this disease. So we pay $46 a sample for the diagnostic lab to run these samples. To date this year, this hunting season, we're about at $396,000 we've expended on chronic wasting disease. That's including the diagnostic lab samples. So by the end of the season, we'll well exceed $400,000 spent out of wildlife restoration funds. Those are 75-25 funds. So 75% of that money is paid for through excise tax on hunting equipment or what have you through the government. 25% is paid for out of this department's budget that comes from hunting licenses and revenue off of our WMAs. So this is not a moneymaker by any means for us, and this is all money that could be used to deliver other programs. So it's definitely affecting the department's bottom line, not to mention the manpower drain. This is a huge, huge manpower drain. But once again, I commend all our biologists. They're doing a super job. So any questions?
Dr. LaCour, on the carcass movement restrictions, we shouldn't include permitted transport to taxidermy.
Yes, sir, I should. It should be on that slide. Yes, sir.
Instead of them.
Right. So we do have a mechanism. Jonathan Bordelon from the deer program did a study before the season and contacted taxidermists and looked at harvest and found that there was no real way for the taxidermist located inside that control area to handle the volume of taxidermy specimens that would be going out of that area. So a permit was created, whereas a hunter can get online, download the permit, take that deer to a taxidermist outside of the control area. The taxidermist confirms receipt of that deer, And then the taxidermist has to basically agree to dispose of that deer properly, which in that case, most cases is going to be going to a landfill, triple bag, go to a landfill. So thank you for bringing that up, but that permit is available.
At some point, will we try to do an analysis of whether or not we think that work, Jonathan had done a lot of work on determining how many deer would probably be subject to being mounted. And at some point, we'll know how many permits we issue
Yes, sir.
to
We can
see if all
certainly,
those numbers add up.
yes, sir. We can look into that information for you.
I would hope that the numbers work out, that we don't think that a bunch of deer left there without the permits.
Dr. Leclerc, one question. I assume that we doing everything that we can do with what the technology we have today to try to get this CWD under control.
Yes, sir. We are doing our best. Every decision we've made has been the Acme decision, the best, the pinnacle, such that the National Deer Association gave the deer program the award that
Right.
we mentioned earlier. So they
Correct.
recognize that unlike some of the other states where political pressure has caused some changes to the desired actions, that Louisiana has stood by their guns, and we have the primo plan in place and acting right now.
Right.
I have an additional question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The along the river, there's a lot of land, and someone pointed out a while ago, it's actually in the state of Mississippi and Louisiana land on the other side. But on the Louisiana side of the river, if some club or somebody that hunts on the Louisiana side, but they killed or harvested the animal in Mississippi along the river, would y'all test that deer, or you say no to that?
We have a reciprocal agreement with Mississippi. They'll test the deer that are on our land on their side, and we test vice versa. So the river is basically our guide, so we will do reciprocal testing of each other's deer, just so that you don't have to transport them across to get them tested or what have you. So, yes, sir, we're working with Mississippi and our other neighbors as well. I think Jonathan had some information for you, Commissioner McPherson.
Yeah, Jonathan Vardlawn, Deer Program Manager, and it was just some updates from the taxidermy permit waiver that was provided. So with that, it's electronic waiver, so they're actually able to do it digitally while in the field. They actually do not even have to print anything for that matter in order to execute it and move it out of the control area. However, with it, we're able to look at in real time how many are actually issued, so we can check those and run them in real time. And for a presentation a week ago, I looked up those numbers, so it's not current, but within a week it'll give you some idea. It was we were at 48 a week ago, so that would be pretty deficient from what we had projected, which points to the need for obviously greater outreach. If you look at where many of those were issued, they were in close proximity, like taxidermists, in close proximity to the control area. So what you would suspect in that case is potentially that, maybe some awareness is playing into that, because we all know that the hunters that are hunting in that parish are traveling to areas far beyond the control area, not just the immediate or adjacent parishes. So that's where those numbers were, and we are able to look at them in real time. But how many, we really had no idea what to expect, and we weren't completely sure how many taxidermy deer were coming out of there prior to the control area being formed. But obviously our projections were well in excess of 50 deer, and that's approximately where we are today.
Well, that's not a good report, because like I say, either your projections were hundreds of deer off,
Certainly.
which probably weren't. You probably couldn't have missed your number by that many. Or either we got a lot of deer going out of there in violations of the carcass export ban, one of the two. One of the things that you ought to put in that thought process is that, like we included that one taxidermist that lived on the highway, just the wrong side of the highway.
Yes, sir.
We need to go back, make a pass back by those taxiderms, see how many more deer they collected over what they have in the past. that would hopefully account for some of that.
Yes, sir.
But y'all haven't touched base with them here at the
No.
end of the season. huh?
No, we have not. We have not explored that at all, Mr. Jones.
Well, it sounds like you're already thinking along those lines and trying to do that, but we need an analysis because enforcement needs to know that. If we're almost sure that we had hundreds of deer that were going to taxidermists outside of that area, and we don't know, since the taxidermists aren't registered, we don't know how many of those really understand correct disposal methods. You know, my taxidermist told me that he takes all of his carcasses up to their private hunting property and dispose of them there, and 10 parishes away from where his taxidermy shop is, and no telling how far away from where the deer that he are receiving is, you know? So
Yeah.
we don't know how educated they are to all of this. I know y'all are continuously trying to get that message out through their association, but they don't all belong to the association.
Yes, sir. And that's a tremendous concern and still an obvious need on our part is the continued education. The outreach obviously has not reached the folks it needed to reach. So we're going to have to, that's an indicator we have a lot more work to do.
Colonel, I'll turn my statement to you. You know, one of the things that I've recognized over the years, and especially serving on this commission, is that the public looks to the agents to a large degree because I think them being out in the public more than the biologists and others are, you know, y'all have more direct public content. And one thing I saw was, and it gets your people in trouble sometimes, or gets the department in trouble, they try to answer every question. And since they've got excellent enforcement training and not much biology training, you know, sometimes they give an answer that they probably shouldn't, you know, they ought to feel comfortable saying, I don't know, but I can get you an answer to that. But on stuff like this, if they could know where the taxidermy shops are and stop by with literature and make that contact, or if they could help with this effort, if you would just put that in your thought process about how your people could be trained on this and think about how to do it. And like with those taxidermy shops, I'm trying to think if it doesn't a taxidermist has to keep the information of where they received the deer from, where it was killed and all, don't they?
Yes, sir. They have to have it tagged with the hunter's name, all that other stuff, where it come from. Yes, sir.
So if they've still got all of those racks, it takes them a year, sometimes longer to get a mount back. So if they could make some stops at this, y'all don't have anything to do. I know y'all get bored after the deer season, so. But if they could make some stops, I think that maybe that word would spread, you know, if they could do some checks of deer, you know, let me see your card, where did your deer come from? And I think it's all in one book, if I remember.
Yeah, we can definitely get with Jonathan and get some literature and some outreach stuff. And as our guys are on patrol, we can absolutely stop by and hand out some literature and talk to those taxidermists.
Something specific with this negative report that we just got from our biologist is if they could stop by the taxidermy shop, and if I remember right, I'm having to try to think on the go, which is a hard thing for me. But as I remember, they register every deer that comes in. It's just in a book. And the area and where that deer came from, I think is also there. Well, if they could look at those control areas and see if they got a deer from Tensall Parish, which is easy.
With no permit.
Then
Right.
where's your
Yeah.
permit for this?
Correct. Yes, sir.
On thing.
And to that point, Mr. McPherson, our agents that are working in that area, you heard Major Skinner say that we've issued 4 citations for export ban in that area. We are allowing a lot of the hunters to self-correct before they leave the area. So we'll see them possibly leaving the area. We'll catch them before they leave the area. And instead of issuing citations and seizing their deer, we will allow them to go back to wherever the animal was taken and self-correct before we get to that point. So those citations would have been a lot higher if we wouldn't allow the hunters to basically self-correct at that point.
Yeah, and I think we all believe that y'all have done an excellent job with those baiting cases and with those. and you're doing exactly what we hoped, you're not just trying to issue citation,
Yes, sir.
you're educating the public in this first year of this. But here we've got a kind of a glaring deficiency, knowing that possibly several hundred deer heads, if not the whole deer, left that area and went to taxidermists. And you can't catch all of them naturally, it's a big part of y'all's job is a deterrent effect,
Yes, sir.
not catching every offender. So just a suggestion, but that would be something you could make a little run at here at the end of the season when all of them's got their skulls in there. They got all this information. And what happened to all those deer from Tensall Parish that didn't get a permit? And those taxidermists up there didn't receive. They were in the control area.
We'll definitely have that conversation with Major Owens and we'll get on it.
Okay. And it's not just Major Owens. They could be coming to taxidermists.
On the coast, yes, sir.
Yeah, we should ban them, but we got too many people from South Louisiana up there hunting too. That was a joke.
Well,
And Mr. McPherson, just so you know, and a lot of taxidermists don't know it either, bulk commercial dumping of carcasses is against the livestock sanitary code. So legally, they can't dump a bunch of carcasses on the landscape. And we've worked with Ag and Forestry on a couple of cases that were brought to our attention. They went out and generally they just call for remediation. They had to clean up the carcasses of people, but they can fine them as well. So
What do we call bulk? Because there's gut piles all over the state.
but it's commercial, any
commercial.
commercial industry, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
any other questions for Dr. LaCour? Excellent program. I'm glad you gave us a
Thank you.
update on this and everyone just proceed, as status quo on this and hopefully, that area, we don't get too many more positives in that area right there. So if everybody follows by the rules, maybe we can get this under control a little bit.
We
So,
all hope so. Thank
yeah,
you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. LaCour. Right, next we'll consider a resolution to urge and request state investment for White Lake WCMA Larry Reynolds Biology.
Where'd you put it, Joel? Trying to get out of here before lunch, huh? Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Yeah. I gotta get the cursor back. It goes way over there. Okay. All right. I am here to present and ask for your adoption of a resolution requesting substantial state funding for the restoration of maintenance of infrastructure at White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area that allows us to manage this important wetland habitat in Southwest Louisiana. Now, we have talked a lot about White Lake. There was a discussion of White Lake at your August commission meeting in New Orleans. And then there was a comprehensive update on White Lake goals, status, and restoration projects, funding, and needs at the September commission meeting. And that led to a presentation and a field site visit at White Lake, attended by Senator Henskins, Representative Bouillock, Commissioners McPherson and Segrera, and Delta Waterfowl leadership in November. And now I'm here with a resolution urging the legislature to provide that substantial funding, hopefully from the budget surplus this year. We are planning a second site visit with invitations to appropriations
members. A letter of support is being generated by NGOs and other partners, all to encourage funding for restoring and maintaining this infrastructure at White Lake. Now, most of you have seen these slides before, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. This is White Lake Wetland Conservation Area, 71,000 acres, of which 52,000 acres is freshwater marsh. And the rest is a mix of pasture, other marsh types, and agricultural area. And most of what I'm going to talk about today focuses on the infrastructure along the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway that you see at the top, Florence Canal that comes through the center and goes to the southwest, and the levee system around Unit 2, which is the 5,000 acre refuge. The primary goals and objectives at White Lake are to sustain and manage the wetland habitat, to manage wildlife species associated with wetlands with a primary focus on waterfowl, and maintain an agricultural presence on White Lake WCA, leased property when feasible, and mostly when compatible with waterfowl management. And it virtually always is, at least before crawfish entered the picture. But those words, sustain, manage, and maintain, require functional water control structures, pumps, and most importantly, the levee system. Without the levees, those pumps and water control structures are rendered ineffective. And that is the source of our major problems at White Lake right now. The Gulf Intercoastal Waterway cuts through 12 miles of White Lake property, which generates 24 miles of levees, of which 22 remain unprotected. There are many locations and broad areas where just a few feet keep the this major navigation canal out of our agricultural areas. And you all have seen this picture from Hurricane Harvey, where the flooding breached the spoil bank of the GIWW to the point that it overwhelmed the equipment trying to stop it. And this inundated our agriculture and marsh property. We have similar problems along the Florence Canal. This summer, we actually got one pump and engine operational, and we're using it to maintain the lower water levels inside that 5,000 acre refuge when levee breaches formed. Okay, that's great. We got our crew out there, we fixed that levee breach, but there was old infrastructure, either water control structure or oil works that were in that levee, and that breach continues to collapse. It's been fixed twice now. We have a no wake zone to try and keep it together, but it's going to be in need of another repair. And then I was also instructed to put together a video presentation of our issues at White Lake in case members of the legislature commission couldn't attend our site visits. And while doing that yesterday, on Wednesday, we located another breach on the levee between Unit 1 and Unit 2. And this is a major source of our problems. At the southwest end is where the TPIC, Texas Petroleum Corporation, is operating this oil field. And the levee for decades, the pipelines, the oil works have been put on top and in the levees, such that the levee at the south end of our refuge needs to be rebuilt, but it's impossible to rebuild it because all of this is on top of it and through it. And so we had a site visit 2 weeks ago, and we're in the process of permitting another levee inside the refuge unit so that we can keep this portion of that impoundment functional. And what I mean is that the levee in its current state at the southwest corner is allowing ingress of water during the time that we need to be pumping.
So under conditions where we need to pump, this levee is discontinuous and it's letting water in. So we're just circulating water. White Lake itself, the north shore of White Lake is eroding. I know that's a huge surprise to everybody. But the shoreline is retreating and that's our property boundary. What's interesting is that even in this area of prevailing south winds, we've got 11 miles of rock breakwater on the southern boundary of White Lake and none on the northern boundary. And why is that important? Because in 2005 and in 2020, that levee keeping our refuge out of White Lake itself was breached. Where that small square is, it was breached during those hurricanes and our refuge was completely inundated. But what's worse is when we contracted with Ducks Unlimited to go out there and fix it. These are the dates. You can see October of 2020. By March of 2021, we got it repaired. But when our equipment mobilized out there, we found there was no more remaining material. That breach has been fixed and repaired who knows how many times since the 1940s or 50s, and there was nothing but a deep hole. So we had to barge 6 barges of material in there to repair that levee that you see on March 1st, 15 feet wide at the proper slopes. But we had high water throughout 2021 with those prevailing south winds coming across White Lake. And this is what we have now. We went from 15 feet to anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, keeping White Lake out of one of our most important waterfowl habitats. Now, we're not doing nothing while these concerns are facing us. On Unit 1, the Guillotine Gate is being replaced. Capital outlay project, estimated about $600,000, but it replaces a hydrologic connection from Unit 1 to the Florence Canal. Thanks to the Louisiana Waterfowl Working Group that directed about $200,000 supplemental appropriation to White Lake, we have purchased engines to restore the pumping capacity on Unit 2. As I said earlier, we had cannibalized the 2 remaining engines to get one working, so that at least we had one 48-inch pump operational. But now we had to quit pumping when the breaches occurred, and now we can't get that engine working again. But that's okay. The two engines have been purchased. They showed up at the distribution center this week. And so we're looking to go to a pre-installation meeting in the next couple of weeks. And lastly, Ducks Unlimited has come up with $300,000 to help address that breach, to not only restore the 15 feet of that levee, but to rock armor it, so that hopefully we can keep those breaches that have occurred at least twice from reoccurring. We hope to get that done by the end of summer. But this is why we need that substantial investment from the state. We were talking about $300,000, $200,000, $600,000 for the projects we have going on. And this is the financial report from last year from White Lake. And as you can see, we generate about $1 million a year in revenue. And last year we operated at about a $350,000 surplus. So that's what we have to operate on an annual basis, at least last year. But these are the costs of the work that we need done. The rock breakwaters along the GIWW to keep the integrity of our property boundaries, $22 million. The rock breakwaters on the White Lake shoreline, another $15 million. That levee that goes completely around Unit 2, certainly the most important, intensely managed habitat out there, a minimum of $3.2 million. And all of our impoundment and protection levies need elevated to the new NAVD 88 standard of 6.5 feet. And the oil and gas equipment removal, which has never been required by the Office of Conservation, is causing us problems in restoring these levees. And the map on the bottom is just the area that we are looking at. The red for the GIWW, the blue on White Lake shoreline, and then along Florence Canal down to that southwest impoundment. So we have crafted a resolution, and you gentlemen have this resolution in your packet. I know that at least a couple of you have already reviewed it. And so quickly, the first three whereas statements detail the act of donation, that it was donated by BP American Production Company to the state of Louisiana because there is a common purpose of the conservation of protection in perpetuity of the White Lake property, and specifically to assure that that property will be retained in its natural habitat. So we're not looking to convert it to a big lake or saltwater marsh or non-agricultural habitats. The next three whereas statements detail the department and the commission's responsibility as allocated by Act 613 of the 2004 regular session. And this specifies that the commission will establish a conservation management plan and raise revenue from the property to support the administration and management to provide public hunting, fishing, and other recreational habitats, as well as contribute to the protection of natural resources and biological diversity to enhance, protect, and restore these natural resources for the people of Louisiana. And this is the current status. These next five whereas statements talk about the status of White Lake. It is an ecologically important and statewide declining freshwater marsh habitat that provides critical refuge in an area of intense hunting pressure. It is the foundation of the only remaining reintroduction program for the endangered whooping crane. But that area has been impacted by levee breaches along the border with White Lake, the Florence Canal, and the GIWW, caused by storm activity, navigation traffic, and age-related deterioration. And thus, immediate funding is needed for the repair and long-term maintenance of the infrastructure necessary to maintain these habitats and manage them appropriately. And so we get to the conclusion and the requested action. Therefore, be it resolved that the commission urges and requests significant state funding for investing in the repairs and protection of critical levee infrastructure along the GIWW, waterfowl management units, to avoid the loss of this freshwater marsh habitat and maintain our management capabilities. And be it further resolved, I appreciate Commissioner McPherson adding substantially to our to the group of people and institutions that will receive copies of this legislation as we attempt to urge the leaders of our state to consider the value of this donated state-owned property and provide funding for maintaining that infrastructure. And so I'm asking for you to consider adopting this resolution.
Any questions first? All right, we need a motion to. Hold on 1 minute. Okay, it's Joe McPherson.
Larry, let me just thank you and your staff's work. Y'all have done a tremendous amount trying to move these projects forward with the resources you have. We've got some great NGO partners in DU and Delta Waterfowl, and I see Ms. Trish here with the Louisiana Wildlife Federation that kind of brought this to our attention, this past year. And I want to, let everyone know how much, Commissioner Segarra has helped taking this, project and becoming the lead on it and, involving the local, legislative delegation. And for him to be able to get them to, take a tour, to, come to his office, participate in these meetings and all, where they've got a firsthand visualization of what needs to be done and understand, and I think they already did, the importance of this project to their area and all. But I just wanted to compliment all of those folks on their efforts in assisting us and what needs to be done for this, critical habitat.
Well, thank you very much. And that's one reason that the Assistant Secretary directed us to do a video that where maybe we can get that to people that can't show up at White Lake at 9 o'clock like you guys did and spend 2.5 hours on a boat. But I agree, that was incredibly valuable. And we will take any opportunity that we can to show people, I mean, take them to the site where this is really potentially a big deal if we lose some of these levees.
Well,
Thank you, Commissioner McPherson, for those words. And I want to echo what Commissioner McPherson said also, is that y'all did a great job on this. We all been working together. We have all of the NGOs working, and it's critical habitat, as we've said more than once. And we've just got to continue to push to get our legislature to come up with the funding, because it is state-owned property. It's not just Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, it's a state-owned property. And it's some of the most critical habitat for ducks in Louisiana. It's very important. So anybody out here, anybody in the audience that could help, and I know the commissioners are going to continue to work on getting this. It's all greatly appreciated and it's very important. So just wanted to thank you guys.
thank you, Kevin.
Just a general observation question. What is our working in this process for funding with CPRA and any other federal source dollars that are coming down that seem to address this very issue?
That is an excellent question, and it's one that's been hashed out at previous meetings. This is a wetland basin where loss rates are not high enough to generate priority with QIPRA or CPRA. And the fact that some of the most important habitats are levied off, and so it's not an open system. QIPRA and CPRA have expressed very little interest in working here. They have helped us in avenues like this to try and generate some priority. They have helped us in communications with the Corps of Engineers, because this is a federal navigation canal, this GIWW. But the Corps has made it clear that they are not responsible for the fact that it's getting wider. There are agreements signed with parishes, I have been told. And so the Corps is not going to do anything. At some point, we have to abandon who should be doing this stuff and recognize that it's our property that's being compromised. And so that's where we're going with this. But it's just because it's levied and because the loss rate, the wetland loss rate in this area is low compared to, say, the Barataria or Terrebonne Basin or Rockefeller's shoreline erosion, we've tried. We've tried a number of times in the past to get a QIPRA project, and it just doesn't rank as highly as projects in the other states.
One other thing.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Larry said it, but also there's no match left on any of this land for us to use to get grants and all that because it's been used up on other projects throughout the state.
Correct.
So-
The donation value, the $40 million donation value was used as match for NACA grants, North American Wetland Conservation Act grants. The first one was for the White Lake property. But because we only had 5 years to, through a matching funds foundation, because we only had 5 years to use the value, there were 19 other projects that the value of that match was used to generate money through the North American Wetland Conservation Act. That's a very good point.
So, and also one other thing I would be remiss not to thank Representative Bourdiak and Senator Hinskins and their work that they've done on this also. They've been extremely helpful in helping us move this along.
Larry, it's a great presentation, and as commissioners, we have, our own fiduciary duty to protect the state property. So with that being said,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. That's why I don't like being chairman, because people interrupt you. Something that might be interesting and would make another slide is if we could identify those 19 other projects that benefited from that little bit less than $40 million.
These right here?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
Chenier Plain Coastal Wetlands, 1 and 2, Chenier Plain, Sabine Island Wildlife Management Area, Lower Neches River, Cypress, Sabine Island. number
you
2.
understand what I'm saying
Yeah, I
without
do.
belaboring it.
I
That
do.
would be good to show that the money, the value of that $40 million BP donation went to all these other projects that the legislature didn't have to put up money because they had that value from White Lake to be able to match those projects with.
Yeah, it's, and I've been, as the waterfowl program manager and as a Gulf Coast joint venture working group, we've made that point. This was the first matching funds foundation that NACA allowed. And it's been used to justify many others because of how successful it was at doing wetland conservation over a broad area.
all right. Any other questions before we ask? At this moment, again, thank you. And what we'll do, we'll ask for, I need a motion to adopt the resolution that's in front of us.
So moved.
Being that Kevin's put a first on it, we got Mr. Joe McPherson with a second. Before we ask a vote, any further questions? With no questions, all in favor, state aye. Any opposition? No opposition. The resolution's gonna pass, the motion's gonna pass.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
there, Larry. Good job. All right, moving on, we have public comment. And I don't have any cards up here for public, but I'll ask anyone in the public that wants to speak, come up and speak. Other than that, seeing no public, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank everyone for coming.